From an eyeless face to a death that they cannot seem to shake, all the way to witnessing someone literally rise from the dead. That's just a few of the disturbing things doctors have seen that I'll be covering on today's top 10 list. Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have this bullet story. This story comes from a person who is working in trauma surgery. One night they got a notification that a man had been shot 3 times in the head and was on the way in. When he gets there, he has literally one eye hanging out of its socket, blood everywhere, and he is slumped over. So it seemed that he had one bullet go in through his temple and out of his right eye socket. One bullet in the nose exited out of the roof of his mouth, and another went in his cheek and out the side of his head. The doctor goes over to examine him and is assuming he'll just be pronouncing him dead, but when he tilts the man's head back, he quickly says, "Yo, be gentle." The doctor accidentally screamed, but he was not alone, as everyone in the room was quickly shocked at the fact that this man was still alive. I guess the entry and exit wounds showed that every single bullet had missed his brain, and he ended up making it through the whole ordeal. In our number 9 spot today, we have this eyeless face story. Before I get into this one, guys, please don't forget to hit the thumbs up button if you're enjoying the video so far, because it really helps us out. This one comes from a nurse rather than a doctor, but I feel like it definitely still applies. She was working at the home of an elderly lady who had some learning disabilities and had also had her eyes completely removed due to a condition that she had from birth. The lady was apparently super nice, but had this habit of wandering around her apartment late at night in complete silence. One night the nurse woke up and left her room at 2 a.m. to head to the bathroom when she had quite the scare. As she left her bedroom, she was met with the old lady who was silently standing in the hall as she turned her eyeless face towards the nurse. Imagine being in a dark room after you just woke up and seeing an eyeless face look at you. It honestly would be enough to frighten anyone before you realized exactly what was going on. In our number 8 spot today, we have another eye story. This story comes from someone who goes by the screen name I'm Cuttin', and they said, "I have quite a few stories. Most of them are hilarious, and then there are those you never want to think about. What messed me up the most was when I saw how eyes change at the moment of death. Imagine you are looking at clear water, but that clear water changes to foggy in an instant. In my 8 years here, I've only seen this once, and I've personally seen well over 250 dead or dying people." This is one thing that I've always thought that I can't understand how healthcare professionals do. I definitely don't think I could see people die all the time, especially not when it's like what he just described. In our number 7 spot today, we have a car accident story. This story comes from a person called Jeremy Howell, and they're recounting one of their mom's stories. Jeremy says, "A guy came in from a car accident and was losing blood. In the midst of resuscitation, the man jolts awake and screams, 'Don't let me go back there. Please, please, please don't let me go back.' A few seconds later, they lost him." What? Like, imagine. That would scare me half to death. Seriously, you guys. In our number 6 spot today, we have this dead guy moaning story. This story comes from someone who goes by the username I'll Do It Later from when they worked at a hospital. They said, "One of my duties was to help wheel patients who had expired down to the in-house morgue. Once we were wheeling an older man from the ER down the hallway when he let out this low moan. I started to panic thinking that he was coming back to life, but the registered nurse explained to me, in brackets they have newbie, that sometimes the air in the lungs doesn't come out until sometime later, or it is delayed for a bit." While I definitely feel like whoever this story is from should have definitely already known this, that would be so scary for a second when you don't know what is happening. In our number 5 spot today, we have a crying blood story. This is another story that comes from a registered nurse, but it definitely needed to be mentioned in this video. A 24-year-old man came into the ER one day with flu-like symptoms. He had some sort of rash that sadly ended up being a symptom of failing a battle with bacterial meningitis, and it was causing him to bleed internally. He was in such bad condition that he started crying, but his tears were blood. She said she could see how scared he was at his eyes, which is so sad sad to think about. He ended up actually passing away, and the nurse whose story this is had said that in her long nursing career, this is the one that just really stuck with her. In our number 4 spot today, we have a whole story. This story comes from someone called Pete Lancosta and is a bit of a gross one, so just a warning. Pete says it was someone who had a massive hole under his right arm, creating a cavity where you could see and hear whistling from the right lung. It had been worsening for maybe 10 years, so the initial injury had mostly healed. Honestly, you guys, I almost couldn't read this one out loud. I can't imagine what that would be like for all parties involved in that situation. In our number 3 spot today, we have a tumor story. This story actually ended up being published in a medical journal for how crazy it is. A 90-pound, 16-year-old girl came in one day with flu-like symptoms, a sore right side with a bit of a bump. They went to check for gallstones, but it actually turned out to be a tumor. It ended up being removed the next week, and it turned out to be a 7-pound tumor that was as big as a dinner plate. This is not normal. It was so big that it had outgrown its blood supply. That's insane and so yucky. I'm glad this one came out with such a positive outcome though. We needed more of that on this list today. In our number 2 spot today, we have this intestine story. This story starts off on a wild note from someone who is explaining one of their mom's stories. It goes, apparently one guy walked into the emergency room entrance holding his intestines in his hand, calm as can be, and shouted, "Can I get a little help, please? I think I'm gonna die." Now, this dude wasn't gutted wide open holding all of his entrails, but he had a pretty major cut to the midsection, causing some of his intestines to be protruding externally. This dude is alive, and my mom told me she had no idea how somebody could walk into an emergency room like that and be so calm. Honestly, props to everyone in this situation for remaining calm, because it undoubtedly saved that guy's life that day. In our number 1 spot today, you guys, we have this rising from the dead story. This story comes from someone who goes by Simple Simon 6262 and is honestly pretty crazy, but also kind of cool. They said, when I was a student, I got called in on a stroke patient. She had coded and they were doing CPR. They worked for 45 minutes, but she died. They cleaned her up and called on the family to say goodbye, but by that time, the family had left. She had been both brain dead and without a pulse for more than 45 minutes. Suddenly, she sat up and called for her family. The nurses rushed to get the monitors and equipment back on her. They started working on her again, she stabilized, said goodbye to her family, and then promptly died a second time. That would be so insane to witness, but I'm also so glad that she got to say goodbye to her family. I honestly think that must be the reason she ended up coming back, even if it was just for a couple minutes. Alright guys, that has been our list for today. In the comments below, let me know if you have any crazy hospital doctor stories. I want to know them, so let me know them. I've been your host, Olivia Kozlowski, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Now I come real close to the camera because I don't know where the button is. They said,